What we've been seeing in Africa, as Nick described, is an expansion of access, but a growing realization that the quality of education in many African countries is essentially dismal. And so people have started to measure the quality, but the problem when you just measure quality on its own is that you don't take into consideration the number of children who are not in school. So you'll have certain countries, for example Tanzania, who do relatively well within standardized international assessments in terms of things like grade 6 maths or grade 6 reading scores, but they still do quite poorly in terms of access to education. In a country like South Africa, on the other hand, you've got virtually universal access to education. Virtually all our children in South Africa, roughly 99% of children complete grade 6. However, we know that the learning levels in South Africa are lower on average amongst grade 6 students than is the case in Tanzania. And so essentially you've got these two different methods, and some countries perform well on access and others well on quality, but you need some kind of overall measure, and that's what we strive to do. If you look at just quality, you're ignoring the children who are not in school, and so it's a biased measure. If you look at just access, you're ignoring how well those children actually can do what they know and what their skills levels are. So there needs to be a way to combine it, and up until now that has not successfully been done. And so what we do is we measure two things. We measure the proportion of children who reach grade 6, and we get that information from comparable demographic and health surveys across 10 Southern and East African countries. And then for the same countries, we look at a test called SACMEC, which is a test across these countries in grade 6 maths and reading. And we calculate the proportion of children who are functionally literate and the proportion of children who are functionally numerate in those countries according to those tests. If you multiply the proportion that reach grade 6 with the proportion of grade 6 students who are functionally literate, you get to the overall proportion in the population of children enrolled and not enrolled who reach functional literacy. And that's essentially the new measure we have. So it gets to a single measure which combines the access to education with the quality of education. The differences are especially interesting when you look at subgroup analysis. So you look at sort of access to learning amongst girls versus boys, or between wealthy students and poor children, or between children in urban areas and children in rural areas. And what you find is that sometimes the differences become compounded when there is both, say, an access disadvantage and a learning disadvantage.
One of the interesting findings from the work was that in the existing literature there's a big focus on gender between boys and girls and the disadvantage that girls face. What we find is that although there are gender gaps, particularly in poorer countries such as Zambia, Uganda and Malawi, the difference between poor children and wealthy children is significantly larger than the difference between boys and girls. So if we take Zambia, for example, which is the country that has the highest pro-boy bias, in other words, the advantage that boys have of all of these 10 countries is largest in Zambia. 7 percentage points more boys are enrolled and learning as compared to girls. But if we look at rich children compared to poor children, it's 3 times as high as that. So the differential is 24 percentage points for rich and poor relative to boys and girls.